Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 17th of February of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Middle East because the most important updates are coming from this territory. Today we got a lot of important updates. There were statements made by Donald Trump, statements made by the Russians, statements made by Zelensky and many other different countries and politicals. So let's discuss them details once again because we have a lot of important details and they are very important. First of all is that tomorrow on the 18th of February negotiations from Ukraine with the participation of the Russian official delegation are to take place in the Saudi Arabia on Tuesday on the February 18th. They are expected to be attended by the high-ranking US representatives including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and US Special Presidential Envoy for the Middle East Steve Witkoff. So this is the first statement about the situation in the Middle East. Later we got several details, several statements from the Russian side. The Russians reported that they will consider Ukraine's lack of sovereignty in future talks. There were reports that there will be no territorial concessions of the lands where the Russian people live. That was stated by Sergei Lavrov regarding the Sudzha direction. There were different statements about Russian delegation, that the Russian delegation is flying to the Saudi Arabia to meet with the US delegation tomorrow. The Russian delegation includes Lavrov and Ushakov. Topics include restoration of the entire complex of Russian-American relations, organizing a meeting between Putin and Trump, negotiations on Ukraine. By the way, according to different sources, Visa and MasterCard will return to Russia in the near future. So this is the question about sanctions and about the relations between Russia and the United States of America. So what exactly I would like to talk with you? You know that during these topics about negotiations in Saudi Arabia, we got a very important update about Zelensky, and according to information we have, Zelensky arrived in the United Arab Emirates. He said that he would discuss the release of Ukrainian prisoners there. Also at the same time, the president's office stated that it would not take part in these negotiations. We're talking about negotiations between Russia and US. In this video, we can see Zelensky arrived in United Arab Emirates with his wife, and this is very important. Later, we got another important detail from Kiev. According to information we have, Zelensky will travel to the Saudi Arabia on February 19th, so the next day, the day after a meeting of US and Russian representatives. This was reported by French newspaper Le Monde. So, and this is not the most important thing. We will discuss in a minute the most important update. So, what does it mean? The Russians and the United States of America are going to have a meeting in Saudi Arabia tomorrow, and tomorrow they will sign everything. Tomorrow the future, the destiny, everything of Ukraine will be resolved, and most likely according to this scenario that will be confirmed tomorrow, the parties are going to move during the next 6 months. So tomorrow is going to be something like a roadmap how to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. At the same time, Zelensky arrived at United Arab Emirates. Some people were saying that he came to this country to get as close as possible to the negotiation table, and if anybody asks him to join negotiations, he will be there as fast as possible. So this is the first opinion. Other people were saying that he came here just to show that he is also somewhere around, always trying to show his power, that he still can influence the process, and that he's very close to the negotiation table. But later, right before we start making the video, we got probably one of the most important updates for the previous 24 hours. Ukraine and the United Arab Emirates signed comprehensive economic partnership agreement. On February 17th, 2025 in Abu Dhabi, Ukraine and the United Arab Emirates signed the agreement. So very important, we'll sign the comprehensive economic partnership today. And what does the agreement entail? 99% of Ukrainian goods will gain full access to the United Arab Emirates market, simplified market access and removal of barriers for businesses, growth in exports in the metallurgy, food industry and oil production sectors, elimination of duties on digital trade and protection of personal data. So this paragraph is the most important. We'll discuss this in details. An investment council and small businesses committee will be established. And the most important, the United Arab Emirates has allowed Ukrainian entrepreneurs to own up to 70% of companies and up to 100% in certain sectors. So what does it mean? What does mean everything that we just read? I will explain in details. The thing is that some people reported that Zelensky by this agreement was trying to show the world that he is still able to, to have some negotiations with different countries, that he still have allies, that he still has different countries that support Ukraine and many, many other things. But telling the truth, when I read this article, when I read this post, first thing that came to my mind is that Zelensky is trying to remove barriers between Ukraine and United Arab Emirates when talking about transferring large amounts of money. And the most important, take a look once again, elimination of duties on digital trade and protection of personal data. This is very important, that if somebody send money to United Arab Emirates, nobody will know who exactly sent them. And the most important, that the United Arab Emirates has allowed Ukraine entrepreneurs to own up to 70% of companies and up to 100% in certain sectors. And once again, I'll remind you that today Zelensky came with his wife to the United Arab Emirates, and as I understand, this day he is going to establish a company maybe where his wife Yelena Zelensky is going to be the only owner, or at least she will have just 70% of this company. The 30% will belong to someone else. It doesn't matter, but as I understand, Zelensky is going to transfer all his money to the United Arab Emirates, which means that he's preparing himself before an escape. So as I understand, Zelensky realized completely that he has no chances to turn the United States of America on his side, that the most likely the draft of agreement was already confirmed between the Russians and the United States of America. Most likely the worst days are waiting for him, and the only thing that he can do right now is to take as much as possible money from Ukraine, to transfer them, and then to escape maybe in the United Arab Emirates. Maybe he's going to escape to London, maybe he's going to escape to another place, I'm not sure, but obviously he has started the process to begin this escaping and this situation. So now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and we have lots of very interesting updates. Most likely the front lines are collapsing. We don't see any resistance from the Ukrainian side despite the losses. The only thing that Ukrainian forces are doing right now is they're giving Zelensky another day, another hour to prepare himself before greatest escape ever since the beginning of the history. When talking about the South Donetsk direction, we see that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. Now, the Russians are attacking, and it seems that they're not going to stop even if Zelensky escaped tomorrow. It seems that the Russians are planning to take the entire Ukraine under complete control, and now it seems that the United States of America are trying to get as much as possible from this situation. Most likely the Russians will sign everything with the States. Most likely the Russians will be, for example, they will sell let's say minerals to US, and US will be the first, let's say, license holder for any resource from Ukraine. So obviously they're going to be a very fair deal between Russia and States, and most likely this deal is going to be completely unfair for the European countries. Once again, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Novosilka. At least this information was provided us by different neutral and pro-Russian resources. As for let's say geolocations, we have the video. In this video we can see a huge Russian convoy with tanks and vehicles that were moving towards the settlement, and how the Ukrainians were trying to slow them down as much as possible. Several tanks and vehicles were damaged and destroyed, but the majority of tanks and vehicles managed to reach the settlement. One of the geolocations took place exactly in this point. Another geolocation took place along the road 0510. Based on this video, we have adjusted the Russian controlled territory along the road 0510 between the settlement of Vremivka and the settlement of Novosilka. Furthermore, different mappers reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of this company stronghold as a result of offensive operation. As you can see, the Russians managed to take these positions as well, and to get as close as possible to the company stronghold from the south. Most likely the stronghold is the next target target of the armored force of Russian Federation. Another video came today from the area of Novoshakhtarsk. It was a very long video published by the 110th Mechanized Brigade of the armored force of Ukraine. In this video we can see how the Russians were moving along the main roads in the direction of the settlement, and how the Ukrainians of the 110th Mechanized Brigade were bombing and attacking the Russians with the purpose to slow them down and not to allow them to reach the river of Ukraine-UAE, but the Russians managed to do this. During this video there were lots of episodes. One of them took place in the vicinity of this stronghold, another took place here. Based on this video we have adjusted positions along the river of Ukraine-UAE in Russian favor. I'll remind you that yesterday pro-Ukrainian sources reported that as a result of offensive operation the Russians managed to cross the river of Ukraine-UAE and to take under control the southeastern part of the settlement. As for now we don't have geolocations that can confirm this, so that's why we will keep this area as a contested area, but we believe that during the next several days we're going to receive first geolocations and then we will adjust the map in Russian favor. As for Ulakli pocket, we see that the situation for the Ukrainians here is very critical. We start receiving first videos with the significant number of prisoners of war that were captured by the Russians during the previous 24 hours. Most of the Russian sources have already colored the pocket in Russian favor, despite the fact that we still haven't received even a single geolocation that can confirm Russian control over this territory. As for geolocations, we have just one video published by the Ukrainian side. In this video we can see, take a look at the weather. The weather is very bad. As you can see, there is a fog, there is a very poor quality, you can't see anything. The drones fly, but the drone provide very bad picture. The signal is very bad. The Russians are advancing, it's very snowy. The Ukrainians were trying to slow down the Russians, but the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to enter both the settlement of Ulakli from the southeast, and we have geolocations that confirm this. And we have another video, another point that the Russians were advancing in the direction of the settlement of Kostyantynivka, and they managed to reach the outskirts of the settlement. I'll remind you that yesterday pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians managed to answer the farm spots. As for now we don't have geolocations that can prove this. We have that geolocation that confirmed that the Russians managed to shorten the distance. So let's wait and see, because today we got a lot of reports from pro-Ukrainian sources that confirm that indeed the Russians answered Kostyantynivka. So let's wait and see. Obviously the situation here is very critical. We see that during this negotiation process the Russians want to show themselves from a very powerful position, and we see that Ukrainians can't do anything with this. Today the pro-Ukrainian sources also adjusted their map once again, and according to the latest update, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians managed to capture completely the southern part of Ulakli and the southeastern part of Ulakli. Most likely tomorrow the Ukrainian source will adjust the map once again, and they will color the settlement of Ulakli completely in Russian favor. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in Andreevka. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians from the 46th Air Mobile Brigade published just one video. In this video we can see how they were bombing and attacking the Russian positions in the central and in the northern part of the settlement. Based on this video we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Let's take a look at the map. By the end of the 16th of February these territories were used to be considered as a contested area. Now we have no doubts that the Russians control the northern part. So this is the situation. We see that the Ukrainians can't do anything with the Russian progress. We see that now the Ukrainians think just about one thing: how to save the money and how to escape until the situation collapses completely. Now let's discuss the situation in the Dnipro direction. There are very heavy clashes in this area. We have some changes on the ground. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Yasna. In this video we can see Ukrainian drones that were attacking the Russian positions right exactly in this point. Based on this video we have adjusted the map. We have colored the territory that used to be considered as a contested zone, and several positions that used to be under complete Ukrainian control. We see that the Russians are trying to improve logistics and to take under control the road TO 515 between the settlement of Yasna and the settlement of Andreevka. Now let's move further. As for the Pokrovsk direction, according to information we have, the Russians managed to restore control over the settlement by the name of Pishchane. I'll remind you that the Ukrainians, when the weather was something below zero, somewhere around zero, the surface and the quality of the surface was very poor, and the Russians didn't have any chances to support their forces there. And the Ukrainians used those weather conditions, and they counterattacked, and those several counterattacks attacks that were carried out by the Ukrainians during the beginning of February and the late January managed them to restore control over the settlement of Pishane. But then several days ago, the frost came to this area, the weather became very deep below zero, and that allowed the Russians to counterattack and to restore complete control over the settlement of Pishane, and the Ukrainians were completely defeated and they were forced to fall back towards the settlement of Zvirova. According to information we have, this weather is going to save their positions for the next several days, which means that the Russians will most likely try to attack deep inside of the city of Pokrovsk with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlement of Zvirova. If the Russians are able to do this, then they will be able to take under control the main supply lines, and this situation will never happen again. The Ukrainians most likely will not be able to force the Russians to fall back towards the settlement of Shevchenko once again. Now let's move further. As for the Pokrovsk direction, as for the Toretsk direction and the Kostyantynivka direction, during the previous 24 hours we got very important video, very important statement and article from this side. Today the head of the DPR, Donetsk People Republic, reported that the Russians managed to take under complete control Kliban-Byk landscape park near Kostyantynivka. That was stated by the head of DPR, and he is not the last man in this structure, in this region. And when he published this information, telling the truth, I was shocked, because when talking about the territory he was talking about, this is exactly the territory. So this is the Kliban-Byk landscape, right? This is it, in the vicinity of Kliban-Byk water reservoir. So when talking about his article, his statement, this means that the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to establish complete control over the territory inside of this red line. So something like this, according to the head of DPR, was taken by the Russians as a result of maybe fast lightning offensive operation. As for now, neither the Russians or the Ukrainian sources confirm this information. Maybe this is true. Maybe both the Russians and the Ukrainians don't want to, let's say, to discover this disaster for Ukrainian side and this victory for the Russian side, because if this information is correct, this will change the situation completely. But I will make a small spoiler for you. Right before we start making the video, let's say a few minutes before I press the button record, the Ukrainian sources published the video of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians in this site. So obviously tomorrow and during the next video there are going to be some adjustments on map in Russian favor, and indeed the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions towards Kliban-Byk water reservoir. I'm not saying that this entire pocket was taken by the Russians, but maybe some 10 or 20 or 30% of this pocket indeed were captured by the Russians during the previous 24 hours. Anyway, this is the beginning of the battle for Kostyantynivka. The Russians will try to take this pocket during the next week or two, and this will allow the Russians to begin offensive along M32 road with the purpose to get as close as possible to the same water reservoir, and this will lead to another cauldron and maybe even to collapse of Ukrainian defense in this area. Something tells me that this is exactly the general battle, and something tells me that this might be the fastest general battle ever since the beginning of the special military operation and maybe of the 20th century. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Chasiv Yar. During the previous 24 hours we have some changes on the ground according to different sources. The Russians improved their positions and they managed to shorten the distance between the city of Kostyantynivka and possible Russian edge positions till the 6 kilometers, which is already nothing. Just one village in front of the Russians. If the Russians take under control Stupushki, this is going to be like a straight way to attack the city of Kostyantynivka, where the Ukrainians most likely don't have prepared defense belt. Another important thing is that the Russians are finishing the clearing of the central part of the city of Chasiv Yar, and this will open the Russians another road to attack the city of Kostyantynivka from the northeast. Something big is going to happen obviously during the next several months. As for the southern Lyman direction and Gubins, just the regular activities were recorded from this territory. The Russians are finishing the clearing of the settlement of Yampolovka. The next target is the city town of Tarskoye. Then the Russians will attack the village of the next village. They stay behind the village of Tarskoye Zarechne, and then they will begin offensive and they will begin the third battle for Lyman. We see that everything is gaining momentum, and most likely we will see the collapse of Ukrainian defense. At least we can see the collapse of Ukrainian defense in the area of Dvorichne. During the previous 24 hours, different pro-Russian and neutral resources updated their maps in Russian favor. The Russians managed to take additional territories around the settlement of Zapadne. The Russians managed to improve their positions around the settlement of Figilivka. Furthermore, today the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation confirmed that this settlement was also captured by the Russians. And once again, this is already not the offensive operation to improve their positions or to gain a foothold. This is already a real full-scale offensive operation with the purpose to attack the Ukrainians in the settlement of Volchansk from behind. And the Russians will just improve their positions and improve their speed from day to day. Now let's discuss the situation in the Sudzha direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to create another ambush for the Ukrainians in the area of Pisarivka. During the previous 24 hours, we got another video with a significant number of episodes of how the Russians were hunting and destroying Ukrainian vehicles in this area along N07 road between the settlement of Sumy and the Sudzha direction. The Russians managed to destroy a significant number of vehicles that Ukrainians were using to support their forces in the Sudzha, but in the Sudzha direction, most of them were destroyed. As for the Sudzha itself, today the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation officially confirmed that as a result of clashes, the settlement of Sverdlika was completely captured and secured by the Russians. Based on the official statement of the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map. Now the Russians have no barriers to attack the Sudzha agglomeration. It's just a little bit less than 9 kilometers. Of course, first the Russians will try to secure the settlement of Lebedevka, and the Russians will try to attack the village from behind. They will attack this village from the north and from the southwest. After the fall of Lebedevka, then the battle for Sudzha starts. At the same time, the Russians returning back very slowly but step by step the territories they lost during Ukraine counterattack. Today, according to different statements, the Russians restore control over the territory around the settlement of Vanseevka. The next target is the settlement of Cherkasskaya Konopelka, and then the Russians will begin attack towards the settlement of Sudzha from the southeast. I'm not sure what exactly the Ukrainians are planning to do, but obviously the situation for them is becoming like a real disaster. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.